The reform secretariat that I head is actually responsible for initiating the reform of the water sector in Nigeria. By that we mean to bring a change, to the water sector in such a way as to enhance sustainable use of water in Nigeria. And in that, we look at it in two ways. There is the broad sector reform in terms of looking at the enabling environment in which we are operating, both at the national and the state levels. And then we also look at utility reform. That means there are utilities that are responsible for service delivery to the people. We look at how we can bring a change to them so that they can deliver the service in a sustainable manner. I think our infrastructure in Nigeria is not yet at where it should be. We do not have sufficient infrastructure to provide service for everyone. And that means the sufficiencies are inadequate, the infrastructure are inadequate. Even those that are already there, they are not in good operational situation. So what should be there? Number one, for the gap that we have, that means infrastructure gap that we have, we need to put in more infrastructure. And that means government have to mobilize funds from within and outside government to be able to deliver more infrastructure to the people. And by infrastructure, I mean water supply facilities, even dams, irrigation facilities, hydropower, all the facets, of water uses. And then we need to put in place also the enabling environment that will be friendly for private sector contribution to the infrastructure development in Nigeria. And that means that government should at least have the appropriate policies. They must have the law that will back up the policies. And then must have, investment-friendly, environment such that at least they can put in place measures that will guarantee investment, and that will make investors to, on their own, want to contribute to infrastructure development in Nigeria. And that is number one. That is for the infrastructure gap. Now, if we're looking at the existing infrastructure also, government needs to support the utility reform by, granting them the necessary autonomy that will make them to deliver service and collect revenue from the citizens who I believe are yearning for this service delivery, which are not there. So government have to support both sides, to support infrastructure, development, and also support utility, development, such that they will be able to provide service, better service to the people, and generate revenue that will sustain service to the people. Our experience so far has been quite good. And what I would like to share is that when we started the reform, we started with what we call infrastructure survey. We carried out a survey of all water facilities in Nigeria in what we call National Baseline Survey of Water Facilities. And our experience that showed that at least we are not managing the infrastructure well in Nigeria. At the end of that exercise, we realized that over 40% of the existing infrastructure are not functioning. And that shows that at least if we are managing what we have very well, we can have more service delivered to the people. So that's first experience that we learned. So operational maintenance then has to be something that we have to put as a component of the reform. And so if we look at how reform is being implemented now, we are looking at preventive maintenance, so that people do not wait on the infrastructure breakdown before they maintain them. And then for those that are there also, we're looking at capacity building for them. Capacity deficiency is another area that we observed. In a number of the water agencies, we discovered that most of their staff belong to the retiring, those nearing their retirement, and those ones are not being replaced with fresh ones that have energy to work and can also, use the latest technology to give service to the people. So in most of the states that we are, coordinating now, we are ensuring that capacity building is taken seriously. It's embedded in the reform program, and we ensure that we follow up on that so that they carry it out. And we also advise government also on the staffing matters so that they recruit from time to time. In one of the states, at a swoop, they recruited about 50 engineers who have been trained and who have been sent to different departments of the agency. I believe in a matter of a few years now, that those engineers will perform very well and the agency will be better for it. So and we also observe that some of the agencies have institutional deficiencies. What do I mean by that? I mean that they are not properly organized and they do not have enough operational guidelines that guide their operation. For example, if you are talking about preventive maintenance, what do you mean by that? What is the guideline that you have? If you are talking about financial management, there must be a financial management guideline or manual that anyone can pick and use, and then even if he leaves the service, the thing continues there, continue to, build a succession planning, for the officers that are in service. So some of these are the issues that we are looking at, from the Secretariat, and we are using to guide the implementation of the reform. Well, like I normally say, water is free from heaven, but potable water is not free, because you have to spend some money to put it in the drinking, at the drinking level. But to say that people do not want to pay for water, I do not agree to that. People are already paying for water. In areas where there are no services, they buy water. There's nobody that is not taking water in one form or the other. And whether they're taking it from the public water supply, or they're taking it from the private, or they are going to the stream to take it, they are paying for it. Because if you buy from government and you do not pay for it, the government will not be able to continue with that service. The public water supply, and that's what is happening in a number of states in Nigeria. Discover that they do not have what they call a stagnation cycle. People are not paying. They have no money to maintain their scheme. The scheme will deteriorate, and they will not be able to produce, and then service will be poor. And that is how it has been all along. But in a situation where they generate revenue, they are able to operate and maintain their schemes very well, service will continue, and then they continue to provide service to the people. So where people do not pay for water, how do they pay for it? They pay for it in their health, in their productivity. If they have to walk long distance before they will get their water, of course that will have reduced the energy that they have remaining to work for the day. But it's where you just turn your tap, water runs, and then you have your energy conserved, and then you can use it for productive service that will improve your economic base for the day. So people are paying for water in one way or the other. So what we advise people, most of our utilities to do, is to educate them. It's because of lack of education. People know that what the potable water does for them, is one, it enhances their health. Good living is enhanced through potable water. Then energy is conserved. They become more productive, and then sanitation also will be enhanced, and that will reduce, diseases in the society. So as a matter of fact, I believe it's because of lack of this information that is creating the situation where people will say, we don't want to pay for water. But in an area where people have been sufficiently, mobilized to know the effect of potable water, they are paying for water. Example, is in Calabar. Calabar is one of the capital cities in the south of Nigeria. We conducted a survey there under the reform program using an NGO approach. And they found out that the people said, look, they are willing to pay for water if the service is there. It is when service is not there that the apathy will develop. But when the service is there and it's regular, and then you make people to pay for it, they are willing to pay. And that city now has the highest tariff for water in Nigeria, and they are paying. It used to be 120 naira per cubic meter. Now it has moved to about 140 naira per cubic meter, and they are still happy. But they get the service 24/7. So they are happy for it. And I believe if those in that state, they are not the richest. In fact, the city is one of the civil servant cities in Nigeria. If a city like that can pay, then what do you talk about economic cities like Lagos, like Kaduna, like Kano, like Port Harcourt? They will be more than willing to pay. So it is because we are not giving the right information, to the populace. That is what is creating a situation that they may not want to pay. As far as I'm concerned, the willingness to pay in Nigeria is high if they have the right information. We have created that scenario to enable us build a gradual approach to the implementation of reform. And what informed that actually is that you must be willing to reform before reform can take place. So in our indicators, we develop it, around two major criteria. The first criteria is the political will to reform. Because reform is a top-bottom approach, whether we like it or not. That means the top, which is the highest hierarchy, the highest political level in the state, must demonstrate commitment to reform before it can take place. The situation that I mentioned in Cross River started with the governor. The governor of the state was the person that initiated the reform there and brought the private sector to come and help him run the utility. So the political will to reform is the number one thing that we look at in the criteria for selection of states. And in that, we have about 2 or 3 sub-criteria that we use. The first one is that if they have the political will to reform, they must have policy for reform. They must have a reform policy in place. That means water supply and sanitation policy. And that's why I like what SUWASA is doing. The SUWASA begins from that. Begins with that. They develop the policy for the state, and then they encourage them to translate that policy into law. And then the second part of it also has to do with the commercialization, of the agency. By what do we mean by that? You have to be able to check your tariff and then have a tariff increase pattern, over time. You say, okay, look, check, because if they do not know how much water costs, how would they be able to generate revenue? So they must have demonstrated that, and we will see it visibly in their calculations, that they have said, okay, they are going to be charging tariff over time, like that, even though if it has not been approved by government. But at least whenever we see such calculations, we know that at least that willingness to reform is in them. Then the second leg of the criteria has to do with the utility itself. Is the utility able to recover cost? That means their cost recovery capability. How much of their costs are they recovering? We have seen in the number of utilities in Nigeria, like I told you, they don't even know what it costs to produce 1 cubic meter of water. So how will such agency then want to recover cost? So we look at their billing and collection. How efficient is it? How much of their customers are they billing? Do they know their customers? How much of them are they billing? How much of the bill they sent out are they collecting? So these are the areas we look at the cost recovery capability at the utility level. And then we also look at the tariff and say, okay, look, if you are able to demonstrate, that you are performing in these areas, then you are also willing to reform. So these are the 2 major criteria from this secretariat that we use to select states. We selected the first level of states in 2004. It was the 3 states that we started with which was Kaduna, Ogun, and Enugu. And then we also used the same criteria to select, additional 2 states, which is Cross River and Lagos, that we added to it. And now we did another selection just last year, and we selected about 12 states. But out of these 12 states, we have 3 frontline states, which are Ekiti, Bauchi, and Rivers. These are the 3 frontline states. And then we have 9 states that are on the verge, or those we can call on the verge of reform, that we can also aid quickly to be on the path of reform. The ranking help us to talk to our development partners. Number one, we are currently developing what we call investment guidelines at the national level. And most of the funds that the national will be given to the states at a later stage, by the time we complete all this election thing, will be based on performance. To be able to have a performance-based approach to project development. That's the basic, that's the major reason why we are doing it. To have a performance-based approach to project development. So when you're performing, we support you to perform better. And then we can also help you to bring some investments from our development partners. Some of them that are very active, they were like the World Bank, African Development Bank, even USAID, French Development Agency. They use this ranking to select the states that they will support, in their development effort. Oh, yes, at least for now, the real major stakeholders are the utilities, who we are targeting to change. And we bring them on board from time to time for one training or one workshop or the other. In 2012, January, we have what we call Utility Reform Workshop, where we showcase all this approach to them. All the agencies in Nigeria were brought on board. The 36 plus FCT agency, they were all brought to Abuja, and we open up, what we call the reform. We define reform, we define the part of reform, the process of reform, and the ingredients of reform. They were all taken through all this one. These are the major stakeholders. And then in 2013, January, we brought in the policymakers in what we call Championing Reform Workshop. And that also was to see how to target both the political class, and the technocrats. The first one was the technocrats, and then we look at also the politicians, the commissioners, the permanent secretaries were brought together. Who are the champions? We want to make them champions of reform. And we gave them also this knowledge, in January 2013. Also this year, we have had another workshop, what we call Strengthening the Reform Workshop. The one that we are doing, how do we strengthen it to have more results? So these are the areas we are bringing the stakeholders, and these are the major stakeholders in the reform process. There are many, many challenges. Number one challenge is getting the people to walk their talk. Because when you say, okay, you want to reform, and when the real thing comes on the table for you to reform, and you are now slowing down, that's a major challenge that I have seen and that we have experienced, in a number of the states that we are working on. When we are working and when we say, okay, let's reform, they say, yes, let's reform. But when we get to the point of reform, you say, I'm coming, we're just giving some minutes. Let's think about it. Let's think of the political implication, some of the things. Those are just some of the challenges that we have. And number two also is funding, because we are not able to go at the pace that we desire to go because you know that water infrastructure is very expensive, and the funds that we have presently cannot take all the states that we think are willing and we can quickly work on to be on the path of reform. And of course, we also have capacity gap, and we continue to build on that from time to time. The achievement so far has been quite good. In the 5 states that have been implementing reform, Number one, we have had improved service delivery. And quite a few of them also have increased their cost recovery efforts. If you take a state like Kaduna, for example, now they are achieving almost 90% cost recovery, where it used to be 40%, 35% before we started reform. And there's more cohesion, in the way they are doing their project. I mean, they are doing their service delivery there. They have decentralized and they have empowered their zonal zones, and they have performance indicators that they are working on. One thing that also we have also been able to achieve is to inculcate in them the KPIs that can be used to gauge performance. So within themselves, they have these indicators and they check from time to time. We have built what we call a financial model for them. That is a holistic approach to improving, water service delivery in any agency. So they use that from time to time to know areas where they have to improve upon, what they need to do to improve their performance. These are some of the key areas. Then also we have built capacity. A number of officials have been trained, both within and outside Nigeria, to be able to perform better, in their work schedule. These are some of the areas I believe we have also, of course, enhanced their delivery efforts by providing some operational support items, vehicles, instrument equipment, and so on and so forth. So in these 5 states, I believe they have performed better. But then the area that I've said, which is part of the challenges I didn't mention, is this human factor. It's not easy to change human beings, and this is another factor that I have observed. But it's a gradual approach. I believe with all the instruments that we have and have developed and have given to them, they're going to change to a situation that will enhance their service delivery. In the next 5 years, we are hoping to be able to spread the reform across the entire country. Like I said, we started with 3, move on to 5. Now we are moving on to 8, and then we have another 9 that we are developing that will take it to 17. So we are hoping that in the next 5 years, we should be able to bring all the states in the country on board the path of reform, such that we on their own know what reform is all about and then be improving the service delivery to the people. Our target is that all citizens of Nigeria should have access 24/7 to potable water supply.